want to get a little bit more into how we are able to live in Italy. This is building off a bit on my very first video, which was a backstory about how we ended up in Italy. And I feel like I can color in the picture just a little bit more for people that are new here or who don't follow our story anywhere else. I'm going to address the first big misconception about how we are able to live in Italy. No, nobody in this family is an Italian citizen. So we do not have Italian citizenship. When I say this family, I'm talking about myself, my husband Alex, and our daughter Emmy. Emmy was not born in Italy, although she does currently go to school here. The main reason why you probably want to know this is so you know how you can stay in Italy for long term. It doesn't matter if you're an American or coming from another EU state. Many people can come visit Italy and they can be here, but that time frame that they are here has a limit. And usually it's 90 days if you are just coming as a tourist, which is just a visitor. If you are planning to buy a property in Italy or perhaps even want to move to Italy, you might want to know your options that allow you to stay in Italy for more than 90 days. I also want to add that depending on your lifestyle and what your plans are, it's also an idea to keep in mind that you can come and go for 90 days as you please. I do know of a family that actually purchased a home near us, and they're kind of doing that right now. They're not here all the time, but when they are here, they'll be in the Union, the European Union, for 90 days and then they'll exit. And this just fits their lifestyle because they like to travel, they homeschool their kids, and they just have that kind of nomad lifestyle. So if that is something that you wouldn't mind and you would actually enjoy, you don't have to worry about this whole residency or visa issue with Italy if that's something that you want to pursue, and if you don't mind kind of roaming about Europe and a little bit outside of Europe just to keep within those guidelines. And this is something we actually did personally when we first came over to Europe to live in Europe after living in New York, because at that point Alex was still just a US citizen. He didn't have any residency from me from a European state, which I'll get into in just a second. But in the beginning, Alex was just a US citizen. So that meant that he could only be roaming around Europe for 90 days at a time. We kept track of this because we didn't have plans of really living anywhere permanently at that point in our lives. We just wanted to travel. We didn't have a daughter yet. Our plan was to simply exit the European Union after the 90 days just to reset it. And this didn't mean that we had to go far. You just have to go to any non-European Union states. So for example, like Albania, it's fairly close to a lot of Western Europe, and it doesn't require you to travel too far, but it still allows you to exit the EU and you follow the rules. So backing up to people who may want to do this a bit more correctly, be a little bit more legit, which I don't blame you. How do you stay in Italy? How do you own a home? How can you live here for more than 90 days at a time? If you want to look at it in the lens of black and white, there are limited options, and I know that's probably not the answer you want to hear. I'm going to talk about the most common ways that you can stay here in Italy for more than 90 days, but I also want you to keep in mind that these aren't the only options, and that if you really want to figure a way to get here and live here, there's ways to figure it out. And I'll talk a little bit about those kind of alternative options at the end. I also want to point out that I am talking about living in Italy. I am not talking about buying a property in Italy. Buying a property in Italy is an opportunity that's actually available to, well, it depends on your nationality, but it has nothing to do with your visa or the logistics of you staying here long term. So when you go to buy a property in Italy, that is very separate from talking about the visa or the long-term residency. Most recently, Canadian citizens aren't allowed to buy property in Italy, or they're not allowed to buy a second home in Italy, because Canada made it a law that Italian citizens can't buy a second home in Italy. And so this is kind of a common, I don't know what the right term for it is, but it's a common practice with EU states that if you can do something in one country, then they reciprocate it and the citizens of that country can do the same in the other country, if that makes sense. If Italian citizens could buy property in Canada, then Canadian citizens could buy property in Italy. So not talking about who can buy property, but I'm talking about who can actually live here and stay here and have residency in Italy. Number one, the most obvious, is that you are an Italian citizen. You have Italian citizenship. This doesn't mean that you were necessarily born in Italy and now you want to move back to Italy. Unless you renounce your Italian citizenship, if you are born in Italy, then you have Italian citizenship. And at that point, great, done, okay, go live in Italy if you want to. For a lot of people, that's not the case, and they try to seek their Italian citizenship or the right to an Italian citizenship. Someone down their family line has Italian heritage, and through that, there are many different ways and actually many different agencies even that help you find your lineage and your right to an Italian citizenship through that family line. If you don't want to do this work yourself, which I definitely don't blame you because it sounds like a complete nightmare, then you can go to one of these agencies. They will do the entire process for you. You don't have to go to the consulate or anything like that. And you just apply through them and they get it done for you. Obviously this costs extra money, but in this case, I think it's worth the headache. The second way to be able to stay in Italy for a long term and have residency here is the way that we are able to do it ourselves. And that is because I have citizenship for another EU country, the Czech Republic. So if you have citizenship for another EU country, it applies to all the EU states. And this means that I can stay as long as I want to. I don't have to be out of the EU after 90 days. I don't have to break it up. I can just live here. And to explain why I have dual citizenship, it's not because I was born in the Czech Republic. I was not. I was born in the US, in Seattle. And the only reason that I am able to have dual citizenship is because my father was born in the Czech Republic. He never renounced his citizenship, so he maintained that during his time of living in the US. So he's also a dual citizenship. And because my father has that citizenship, I was able to apply for citizenship to the Czech Republic, and that meant that I got a passport, I got a residency, I got an ID card, everything. If the US didn't exist in my life, then I would just be a sole citizen of the Czech Republic, even though I was not born there. The chances of you having some tie to Italian citizenship might be slimmer. What I mean by that is we can't expect all of us to have some kind of Italian in us, but the US is a melting pot, and the chances are that you have some kind of heritage that ties to some European country. I'm speaking in very broad terms. This is a very generic statement, but I'm just talking about it in relevance that you have a higher chance of being tied to some kind of European country, and that doesn't mean just Italy. Even though your immediate family may not be an immigrant like my father, clearly he came from the Czech Republic, he was born there, but he came to the US. If that's not your case, that doesn't mean that you don't have possibly some kind of right to a European citizenship of another country. If you want to pursue staying in Italy for a longer term and you know that you're not Italian at all, this is your time to do your homework. If you already know about your family's history a little bit and know that you could have a slight chance of getting a citizenship from another European country, then look into it. And if you're not sure, then start doing some DNA research or research of some kind that will open up this door for you, because a lot of people don't realize that it is something that's not difficult. It seems like a far-fetched idea, but a lot of European countries have this extension of offering citizenship to people with that heritage, even though they don't live in that European country or they don't even have family existing there anymore. That's okay. There's usually a way to get the citizenship regardless. And I'm not going to say that that the process for all countries are made equal. That's definitely not the case. There are some countries that make it super difficult for you to get citizenship if you weren't born there, but then there's other countries that make it pretty easy. And again, you can always hire some kind of agency that specializes in this because this is what they do. The purpose is to make it easy for you. And especially if money really isn't a concern, then yes, pay the fee and figure out how we can make it happen. So to summarize, number 2, you need to have some kind of citizenship for an EU country. It doesn't matter what EU country it is, as long as it's an EU state, then you have citizenship within the entire EU, and that allows you to stay longer term in Italy. And to clarify, because of that, even if you do pursue that route, so for example, I am a citizen of the Czech Republic, I am still not a citizen of Italy. Obtaining Italian citizenship, even as an existing EU citizen, is a completely different story. The Italian state is not going to just hand out their citizenship just because you are an EU citizen. And lastly, number 3 is through marriage. That is a strategy as old as time itself, but it is still very much valid. So if you are married to either an Italian citizen or an EU citizen, then you have just as much right to do whatever your spouse does. And this is the only reason that Alex, who is my husband, is able to join us and live with us in Italy. This is because we obtained a long-term residency for Alex in the Czech Republic. So again, it has nothing to do with Italy, but he has a long-term residency through an EU country, which is the Czech Republic, and that is valid in any EU state. So if we were to be doing this in Spain, doesn't matter, we could still do it because of that citizenship through another EU country. And then we have our daughter Emmy, who has a similar situation to me, but in reverse, because she was born in the Czech Republic, so naturally she's entitled to that citizenship. But because Alex and I are American citizens, she was also able to get a US passport because she can also be an American citizen. So she is a dual citizen, as am I. So for us too, the process is very simple. The only hiccup that would prevent this from being a perfect case is my husband Alex, because he is still just a US citizen. He does not have citizenship of a EU country, he just has long-term residency, which is essentially a visa that allows him to stay. So what if none of this applies to you? I don't want anyone out there thinking that they're completely just out of luck if none of those 3 scenarios applies to you, because it's not true. And I can vouch for this because I personally know people that do own property here in Italy and stay here long term in Italy, even without any of those 3 scenarios applying to them. So there's always a chance that you can figure something out. Where there's a will, there's a way. And you might have heard of Italian bureaucracy being a complete nightmare. And the root cause of this, it's true, by the way, but the root cause of this is because no 2 people have the same experience. And what I mean by that is that there's always a different way to do the same process. So there's the same outcome that we all want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you will go through the same process as the person before you did. So this is super frustrating, obviously, but also gives you some hope because it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to be so black and white. The other common ways that you can stay long-term in Italy are through different types of visas. So you have the tourist visa, which again expires after 90 days. If you want to stay longer, you can opt for something called an elective residency visa. That type of visa has certain requirements, and I'm not going to get into it in this video, maybe in the future, but that is an option that if you are curious, just do a simple Google search and you'll get a good taste of what that requires. The other type of visa that people will go for is a digital nomad visa, and that means that you are a non-EU citizen and you are working online. Again, there are restrictions and kind of parameters that you do have to follow if you do pursue that type of visa. And then there's a student visa, which obviously you have to be a student. And then there's other types of visas like work visas as well. But those two I would say are very particular to your scenario. There's not too many ways to color outside the lines with those two. So while they are possible and perfect for some people, if you fall directly in that criteria, then great. I wouldn't necessarily pursue those two types of visas as the first choice. So there you have it, a brief explanation on how Alex and I and Emmy are able to live here in Italy long term and not have to get out after 90 days. I hope that this video painted the picture a little bit more for people who are new here or know nothing about our story. If there's anything else that you might be curious about knowing, then please drop it in the comments so I can make a video about it, because I have committed to being an open book, and whatever you want to know, I'm here to share.